Imagine this. You wake up one morning and realize something is wrong. Not in your life, but in the world itself. The air feels heavier, the colors dimmer, as if an invisible weight presses down on everything. You go about your day, but every interaction, every news headline, every moral demand imposed by society now feels off. Not because it's openly cruel, but because it's too perfect, too righteous, too demanding of your compliance. You begin to notice contradictions everywhere. The same culture that preaches tolerance silences dissent with a fury that borders on religious fervor. The same people who claim to champion freedom police thoughts with the zeal of inquisitors. The same institutions that promise justice punish those who question their methods. And then it hits you. Morality has become a cage. Not the morality of ancient wisdom, not the kind that asks you to reflect, to grow, to face your own darkness, but a new synthetic version. A morality manufactured by invisible architects, one that doesn't liberate but controls, one that doesn't guide but guilts, one that doesn't elevate the soul but enslaves the mind. How did this happen? When did goodness become something you perform rather than embody? When did virtue turn into a public spectacle, a social credit game where the rules shift without warning? When did the fear of being wrong, of being judged, override the courage to think for yourself? This is the hidden tyranny of modern morality. It doesn't announce itself with force. It doesn't need to. It operates through whispers, through the quiet, gnawing fear that you might step out of line, that you might think the wrong thing, that you might be seen as flawed. It thrives on your compliance, your exhaustion, your willingness to surrender judgment in exchange for belonging. But here's the paradox. The more moral society claims to be, the more oppressive it becomes. Consider this. A man speaks an unpopular truth and is ruined. The crowd doesn't debate him, it erases him. Not because he is evil, but because he is inconvenient. A woman lives her life quietly, harming no one, yet she is called selfish for refusing to adopt every cause thrust upon her. Her crime? Not conforming to the collective demand for perpetual outrage. A child is taught to apologize for sins he never committed, to bear guilt for crimes he didn't commit, to shrink himself so others won't feel challenged. This is not morality, this is moral engineering, a system designed not to make you better, but to make you obedient. And the most terrifying part, you've internalized it without realizing. You hesitate before speaking, not because you lack courage, but because you've been conditioned to fear the mob. You silence your doubts, not because they're unfounded, but because you've been taught that questioning is dangerous. You perform the rituals of modern virtue, the right words, the right opinions, the right displays of outrage, not because you believe in them, but because disbelief is social suicide. But what if this morality isn't just oppressive? What if it's also fake? What if the grand ideals of modern ethics are not about truth, but about control? What if the constant demand for purity, for ideological conformity, for performative empathy is just a new form of psychological domination? And most importantly, what if you've been complicit in your own imprisonment? This is the question that unravels everything. Because the moment you see the cage, you also see the key. But before you can grasp it, you must first understand how deep the trap goes. The cage doesn't look like a cage. That's the first rule of control. The most effective prisons are the ones you don't notice. You don't feel the bars tightening around your mind when you nod along to opinions you don't truly hold. You don't hear the lock clicking shut when you swallow your doubts to avoid conflict. You don't see the walls closing in when you trade your curiosity for the warm, hollow comfort of belonging. But they are there. And they were built long before you arrived. The birth of synthetic morality. Modern morality did not emerge from philosophy, spirituality, or even genuine human concern. It was manufactured. Like fast food for the soul, it was designed to be addictive, easy to consume, and ultimately empty. Nietzsche saw this coming. Over a century ago, he warned of slave morality, a system where the weak inverted values to dominate the strong, where guilt replaced honor, where victimhood became power, where the herd dictated what was good, not by truth, but by consensus. But even he couldn't have predicted how efficiently this inversion would be industrialized. Today, morality is no longer a personal compass, it's a social credit system. one where your worth is measured by how well you conform to ever-shifting standards of ideological purity, one where dissent is not just discouraged but pathologized, labeled as ignorance, bigotry, or even mental illness. Why? Because unquestioned morality is the perfect tool of control. The psychological wiring of compliance, the mechanisms are not accidental, they are engineered, drawing from the deepest vulnerabilities of the human psyche. The fear of exclusion. Humans are tribal creatures. Our ancestors survived by staying within the safety of the group, and our brains still equate social rejection with death. Modern morality exploits this instinct ruthlessly. Step out of line, and the punishment isn't violence, it's erasure, cancellation, exile from the digital tribe. The addiction to virtue signaling, social media transfers morality into a performance. Every post, every share, every carefully curated outrage is a bid for validation. But beneath the facade, it's a Faustian bargain. You trade authenticity for approval, and in doing so, you hollow yourself out. The illusion of moral progress. We're told society is evolving, becoming kinder, fairer, more enlightened. But what if this is just a new dogma? What if the constant demand for moral perfection isn't progress, but a collective neurosis? The philosophers who predicted this isn't paranoia, it's a pattern observed by the sharpest minds in history. Carl Jung warned of the shadow, the repressed darkness that when ignored grows more monstrous. Modern morality doesn't integrate the shadow, it denies its existence, creating a society of smiling hypocrites. Aldous Huxley foresaw a world where people would love their oppression, where control would be enforced not through pain, but through pleasure, distraction, and the illusion of moral superiority. Jean-Paul Sartre exposed the bad faith of those who cling to rigid moral systems to avoid the terrifying freedom of choice. And yet, here we are. The ultimate trick. Moral consumerism. The most insidious part. Modern morality is commodified. Corporations sell you social justice like a branded product. Politicians weaponize empathy to manipulate votes. Even personal growth has been turned into a marketplace where you're told to buy your virtue through courses, books, and performative activism. This isn't ethics, it's ethics theater, a spectacle where the audience is also the performer, and no one dares to ask if the play makes sense. The unspoken truth. Beneath the slogans, the hashtags, the viral outrage, lies a simple, terrifying reality. This system doesn't want you to be good, it wants you to be manageable. It doesn't care about justice, it cares about compliance. It doesn't fear your sins, it fears your awakening, and the moment you realize that is the moment the bars of the cage begin to rust. The greatest trick tyranny ever pulled was convincing the world it didn't exist. You don't feel the chains because they're not wrapped around your wrists, they're wrapped around your perception. You don't notice the prison because the walls are made of ideas, not stone, and yet the effects are everywhere, seeping into the cracks of your life, warping reality itself. This is the power of unchecked moral conditioning. It doesn't just control actions, it rewires minds. The death of independent thought. There was a time when heresy was punished by fire. Today, it's punished by silence. Disagree with the mainstream narrative, you're not wrong, you're dangerous. Question the moral consensus, you're not curious, you're immoral. Think for yourself, you're not independent, you're isolated. The result? A society of ghost thinkers, people who could reason but have forgotten how, who could dissent but have been trained to fear it. The French philosopher Michel Foucault saw this coming. He warned that modern systems of control wouldn't need brute force. They would operate through soft coercion, where people police themselves out of fear of being excluded. And it worked. Now, entire generations have grown up believing that conformity is morality, that silence is wisdom, that fitting in is the highest virtue. The rise of performative suffering. In a world where victimhood equals virtue, suffering becomes currency. The more oppressed you appear, the more righteous you're seen. The more outraged you perform, the more moral you're considered. But this isn't empathy, it's empathy theater. People don't care about injustice. They care about being seen caring about injustice. They don't want to solve problems. They want to signal that they're on the right side of them. The psychologist Carl Jung called this the shadow of virtue, the hidden narcissism behind performative G. Oodness. When morality becomes a social game, the appearance of righteousness matters more than righteousness itself, and the casualties, real issues, get reduced to hashtags. Complex debates get flattened into slogans, and the people who actually suffer become nothing more than props in someone else's moral posturing. The emotional sterilization of society, modern morality doesn't just dictate what you say, it dictates what you're allowed to feel. Anger, only if it's directed at approved targets. Doubt, only if it aligns with the sanctioned narrative. Love, only if it's politically uncontroversial. This is emotional totalitarianism, a world where your inner life is no longer yours, where spontaneity is suspect, where authenticity is risky, where the right feelings are mandated by invisible arbiters of virtue. The existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre saw this as the ultimate form of bad faith, the lie we tell ourselves when we surrender our freedom to fit into a prefabricated identity. But the cost is higher than we realize. When you're not allowed to feel fully, you stop living fully. The manufactured division. Divide and conquer is the oldest strategy of control, but modern morality has perfected it. You're either with us or against us. You're either woke or bigoted. You're either pure or tainted. There's no nuance, no dialogue, no room for human complexity. This isn't an accident. A fractured society is an obedient society. If people are too busy fighting each other, they'll never notice the real chains. If they're too consumed with tribal hatred, they'll never unite against the true oppressors. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer understood this well. The cheapest sort of pride is national pride. For if a man is proud of his own nation, it argues that he has no qualities of his own of which he can be proud. Replace national with ideological. And you have the modern world. The spiritual vacuum, the most devastating consequence of all. Modern morality doesn't fill the soul, it starves it. It offers rules without wisdom, guilt without redemption, and outrage without purpose. It demands purity, but provides no path to growth. It condemns sin, but denies the possibility of transcendence. This is why, despite living in the most moral age in history, people feel emptier than ever. The Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky warned, "If God does not exist, everything is permitted." But the modern world has found a way to make everything forbidden, and yet, somehow, meaningless. The turning point. These consequences are not inevitable. They are the result of a system that depends on your unconscious participation. But the moment you see the strings, you can't unsee them. The moment you realize you've been played, the game changes. And the moment you stop complying, the cage begins to crack. The first real act of rebellion is not shouting in the streets. It's thinking in silence. Because the system doesn't fear your anger, it fears your awareness. Every dictator, every oppressor, every tyrant in history knew this truth. Control depends on the illusion of inevitability. Make people believe their chains are natural, and they'll never try to break them. But you are about to shatter that illusion. The courage to think dangerously. Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." This is your first act of defiance, to think thoughts that are yours alone. Question what you've been told is sacred. Doubt what you've been assured is obvious. Entertain ideas that have been branded forbidden. This isn't about contrarianism, it's about sovereignty. The moment you reclaim your mind, you cease to be a subject. You become ungovernable. Exercise. Next time you feel the instinct to nod along, pause. Ask yourself, do I truly believe this, or have I been trained to? The art of moral disobedience. Gandhi didn't defeat an empire with weapons, he defeated it with unexpected behavior. Modern morality expects your compliance. It's prepared for your outrage, but it has no defense against calm, principled refusal. When guilt is weaponized, refuse to feel ashamed. When consensus masquerades as truth, stand alone. When the mob demands your confession, stay silent. This is how you starve the beast. Historical example, Socrates drank hemlock rather than stop questioning. His students carried on his work. The Athenian rulers who condemned him, forgotten. 3. Reclaiming your emotional territory. Your feelings are not public property. Modern morality seeks to colonize your inner life, to dictate what you should feel. Your rebellion begins when you allow yourself unapproved emotions, refuse to perform sanctioned reactions, embrace contradictions within yourself. Carl Jung's shadow work becomes revolutionary here. I'd rather be whole than good. Practice. Keep a private journal of true feelings, not what you're supposed to feel, but what you actually feel. Watch how the world tries to punish you for this honesty. The power of strategic withdrawal. Not every battle deserves your energy. The system wants you exhausted, constantly outraged, perpetually engaged in meaningless debates. Your countermove. Disengage from virtue signaling. Ignore manufactured controversies. Withhold your attention from moral panics. Like a judo master, you defeat the system by letting it exhaust itself. Modern example. Notice how quickly social media mobs move from one target to the next. They need your participation. Deny them. 5. Building parallel structures. Revolution doesn't happen by overthrowing. It happens by building alternatives. Create real communities where honest dialogue thrives. Develop personal codes of conduct beyond social media's gaze. Cultivate private spaces where forbidden thoughts can breathe. The existentialist Albert Camus understood. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Action step. Find one person with whom you can have completely uncensored conversations. This is how resistance begins. The ultimate weapon, self-knowledge. They can control you only through your unknown weaknesses. What fears make you compliant? Which desires make you manipulable? Where are you not as free as you believe? The philosopher Epictetus, born a slave, discovered this truth. No man is free who is not master of himself. Interrogation. Each night, ask, where today did I act freely, and where was I acting from conditioning? The turning of the tide. These acts seem small because you're still inside the system. From the outside, they're revolutionary. Every time you think independently, feel authentically, refuse to perform, you don't just free yourself, you create a crack in the prison walls for others to escape through. The system will retaliate, it will call you names, it will try to isolate you. But remember, a man who cannot be shamed cannot be controlled, and a mind that thinks for itself becomes the architect of new worlds. The most dangerous realization is not that you've been lied to, but that you wanted to believe the lies. This is the final veil lifting, not just seeing through society's illusions, but understanding why you clung to them so desperately. The truth you've been circling is both terrifying and liberating. Modern morality didn't enslave you, you enslaved yourself. And this means your freedom was always within reach. The grand illusion, the myth of moral progress. We've been told a story that humanity is evolving towards some moral zenith, that each generation becomes wiser, kinder, more enlightened. But look closer. Ancient Stoics practiced radical self-mastery while we medicate away discomfort. Medieval monks cultivated profound focus while we're addicted to distraction. Indigenous tribes maintained ecological balance while we ravage our planet. The uncomfortable truth: we haven't morally evolved, we've just changed our vocabulary. Beneath the surface, we're the same flawed, beautiful, contradictory humans we've always been. The only difference: now we pretend otherwise. Nietzsche saw through this. Moral judgments are never to be taken literally. As such, they never contain anything but nonsense, but they are invaluable as signs. The signs point not to truth, but to power. The psychological payoff of moral submission. Why do we comply? Not just from fear, but because it serves us. The comfort of certainty. Moral systems provide ready-made answers. They spare us the terror of true responsibility. Like psychological parents, they tell us what's good and bad. The high of superiority. Virtue signaling delivers dopamine hits of moral superiority. We become addicted to feeling right while others are wrong. It's spiritual junk food, satisfying in the moment, empty in the long run. The avoidance of self. Focusing on society's sins lets us ignore our own shadows. Collective guilt is easier than personal transformation. As Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. The radical alternative, beyond good and evil. True freedom begins when you realize morality was never the point. The existentialists glimpsed this. Sartre showed how we invent meanings to avoid freedom's burden. Camus revealed how life's absurdity demands we create our own values. Kierkegaard understood that true faith requires a leap beyond ethics, but the most shocking realization: you don't need permission to be human. The path of the integrated self. Integration, not perfection, is the way forward. Embrace your hypocrisy. You contain multitudes. The saint and sinner coexist within you. Stop trying to purge your contradictions. Understand them. Practice ambiguity. Tolerance. Most truths exist in shades of gray. Learn to dwell in uncertainty. As Dostoevsky showed, true wisdom often lives in paradox. Reclaim your agency. Your choices matter more than your beliefs. Stop outsourcing your conscience. Let actions, not slogans, define you. The final revelation, the antidote to modern madness. After peeling back all the layers, one truth remains. The only authentic morality is that which springs from your own examined experience. Not from social media frenzies, political factions, corporate-sponsored activism, intellectual fashion trends, but from your deepest reflections, your hardest-won lessons, your moments of authentic connection, your willingness to face what's true rather than what's convenient. This is what Viktor Frankl meant when he wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." The invitation. The cage door was never locked. You were just told it was. Now you know better. The question remains, will you continue performing morality like an actor in someone else's play, or will you step off the stage into the terrifying, exhilarating freedom of writing your own script? The choice, as it always was, is yours alone. Final thought, as you walk away from these words, notice something. The world will continue spinning, the moral mob will keep raging, the system will keep demanding your compliance. But now, for the first time perhaps, you have the tools to stand apart, to think clearly, to act deliberately, to be truly human in an age of mass delusion. This isn't the end, it's your beginning.